All right. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's having a great day today, and we're really excited for this webinar, Using Data to Have Hard Conversations. And this is going to be a fun conversation with my panelists here today, and we're really going to dive in deep how you use data, how it impacts the resident journey, and how some systems can go and support that. So let's get kicked off. On to the second slide. Here we go. Housekeeping. Always got to do this before we kick it off. Recording will be sent out after this webinar, so you'll get a friendly email with a link to that, also with our presentation and slides. So don't worry about recording or taking notes. We will send it to you all afterwards. If you do have a question, we have a Q&A section. We have a chat function. Whatever you need to do to put in your questions, we will answer them along the way. And myself here is Josh Studzinski. I am the Chief Growth Officer here at CarePredict, and I'll be moderating this fantastic panel that I have here today. I'm going to introduce Kristin. Kristin, welcome to the panel. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everybody. Really glad to be here. Little bit about myself. I have a nursing background and have been in senior living for well over 25 years as clinical leadership, operations, and sales, and hoping to tell you more about how data can impact your world in senior living.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristin. Scott A.I. Smith.
That's right. So I am Scott Smith. Background in senior living. I've been in the industry since 2012. Started at a little company called It's Never Too Late, which is now Life Loop, and then moved over to the provider side, working for Thrive Senior Living, Director of Education, working over the memory support communities, as well as for life enrichment, and then moved over to 5-Star Senior Living, where I oversaw programming and memory care at the 140 some communities that we had there, and now the Senior Vice President at CarePredict.
Our panelists here today. So if you do see some issues with any Wi-Fi or somebody freezing, they are both at communities right now. So we are live on site at communities and dealing with the situation and having hard conversations right now. So let's go on to the next slide. Why does this matter? And why do words matter when we think about data and these conversations? Kristin, why do they matter so much in senior living?
Well, we're taking care of people's loved ones and families, and that is very important to them. It's very emotional. And when we're able to present objective data that tells a story, it really helps us to have those conversations.
Would you agree with that, Scott?
Yeah, I think you're looking at for a lot of people, the decision to move a loved one into senior living comes with a lot of guilt. There's a lot of emotions that you're dealing with. So when we can take the emotion out of some of the conversations, I really think that helps. And again, there's nothing more personal than someone's mother or father, especially at that stage of life. And so, again, everyone has the right heart that's in this industry. And so the data sometimes can tell the complete story.
When you think about all of the data points that you get and you think about those emotional conversations, what are some things that you shouldn't be doing? What topics should you not be bringing up with some of those data points? Kristin, what would you lean into?
Well, I'm not sure where you're angling there, Josh. I'm sorry. Could you reframe the question?
Yeah, when you think about the emotional conversations that you're having, are there
Yes.
topics that you wouldn't want to necessarily bring up when you're discussing, someone coming into an assisted living community, somebody moving in terms of levels of care? Are there anything from an emotional standpoint that you would kind of stray away from during those conversations?
I don't, there's really nothing that comes to mind that I wouldn't talk about.
Okay.
It's really understanding where they're coming from, where they are on their journey.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with, again, reading the family member. Some people are ready to have some deeper conversations, some people aren't, and so it's really understanding the customer, meeting them where they're at. So there may be times where when we look at this type of stuff, which we'll talk about, that you tend to maybe struggle a little bit with that, understanding the needs of that resident right away. They're not ready to have those conversations with some of the ADLs. And so that's where when data can kind of help us after we have that resident moving in, to where we probably have a fuller picture. So a lot of times what we see, and many of you guys that are in the industry may experience this, where we're not actually getting the complete truth from the family right away. They may be underselling a little bit or overselling the skill set or the acuity of their loved one. And sometimes we need to wait a little bit. The residents moved in, we get some more data that we can have those conversations. Sometimes the pushback early on is a little bit tough when it comes to the initial care that a resident may need. And then we can utilize that data very quickly to kind of right size some of those things. So I think when I look at that, I think sometimes that you want to avoid that confrontation early on when it comes to exactly needs they may have, but we want to make sure we right size that immediately or as soon as possible when the emotions are a little bit less. And so moving that initial, it's so overwhelming for the family members as they're trying to move a resident in, a loved one in, deciding where to go. Sometimes some of those conversations may not happen right away. They may need to happen after that person's moved in and been there a couple of weeks.
Well, that makes sense, right? You have limited visibility, you have limited interactions with that resident and that family. So coming at them with all of those discussion points and conversations is overwhelming, right? There's so much information and so many changes that are going on at that point that it's very difficult.
Yeah.
You know, when we look at when care teams need to shift and we think about the data that goes into that and the level of care and the family and the tough conversations, you know, Kristin, how would you address some of those things when we think about some of these bullets here in terms of safety, support, service levels, and cost? How do you go about even kind of starting those conversations?
Yeah, and I think Scott kind of alluded to that with what he was saying. When people are moving in, there's a lot of emotions, a lot of things to understand, a lot that goes into that. Once somebody is living in your community and you are seeing what the needs are, then safety being your priority with the resident and meeting their needs, you're gathering data, you're gathering information and developing customized care plans for these people, and you're able to have conversations then with residents and their families about what the care needs actually are. They may have thought they were one thing moving in. Now that they're supported, maybe they don't need as much, or maybe it turns out they need a lot more than we thought they did when they were at home.
That makes sense. Scott, what do you think is kind of that hardest part of those conversations?
Well, I think it comes back down to kind of, there's always a balance, there's always a challenge in senior living is, are we selling amenities and are we selling lifestyle, or are we selling clinical care? And so it's really trying to balance those two. And many times from a sales perspective, we're really balanced. We're selling lifestyle, we're selling engagement, we're selling amenities, but at the crux of what we provide, it really is care. And so a lot of times it's a pivot once that resident has moved in to saying, okay, now let's really evaluate these things that are really important. You know, we may have moved in because of some of the amenities that we had, or because of that ability to interact with other residents and things like that. But now we really focus on the safety, support, and service level things. And so it just kind of really depends on the sales process, what we leaned into, what the family members really were looking for initially. But at the end of the day, what we really provide in senior living is the safety, the support, and the care. And so if that isn't discussed as in depth early on, then those conversations definitely need to happen soon. And we'll talk later on about it, but it really does impact so many different things when it comes to your labor model and all of that. So getting that information accurate as soon as possible is a huge, huge part of seeing success long-term.
Absolutely. So as you kind of alluded to, kind of positioning yourself as that community for care, for support, you know, there's been a trend that, you know, was probably about 5 or 10 years ago. A lot of communities are positioning as more hospitality, more amenities, concierge. Are you suggesting communities kind of move away from that and position themselves more as that continuum of care opposed to the hospitality? Where should they lean? What do you think about that?
It really depends. I mean, it depends on your market. It depends on so many different things. I think it's what we know is that in the industry, many of the services that are provided in a senior living community can be provided at home. As technology is advanced, those things. The major differentiator between living in a community and living at home is really that social component to it. So I do encourage people to really lean into that because I think it is such an important part of overall wellness. However, I think for anybody, it's really understanding your customer. What does that customer want, and be able to kind of fluctuate between those two, because a really good community is offering both. I'm offering kind of a great lifestyle, but I'm also providing for your safety and your daily care as well. But for anybody, it's leaning into what does your community do really, really well and accentuating those things. If you provide the best possible care, but you may not have all the amenities, that may be your focus point a little bit more. At the end of the day, once somebody moves into our community, we know for the most part, their needs are going to just increase over time as they age. So no matter why they initially moved in, care is always going to be an essential piece of this and needs to be highlighted. And and I think it's something that we don't always talk about, but it is at the end of the day the main reason. We know in the industry, typically when we would always talk when I was at a different, in the community setting, was who is our customer? And many times it's the adult daughter, right? That's kind of that's the adult. So what are they really looking for? Well, they're typically looking for mom or dad is being cared for and they're safe. And then the resident themselves is looking a lot of times for safety, but also for those amenities and that lifestyle. So you kind of have two customers every time you interact with them. You have the adult child, and then you also have the resident. And so they may have very different objectives.
That makes sense. Go ahead.
And I'd like to add on to that it may be amenities that are driving them when they move in. Once people are settled, they want to age in place. They don't want to have to move on to a higher level of care. And they really want to be somewhere where the team that they're providing care for them is proactive and identifying risks for move out early on and helping them navigate through that.
Absolutely. We actually had a couple questions come on this slide, so let's answer these live here. So we have Adrian coming on in. Can marketing tools better help manage difficult conversations or guide families through the overwhelming logistics? Wondering your guys' thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I think having tools that show what your process is at your community for understanding level of care and what those different situations look like and what your community can do to support residents in their journey are really impactful for people.
I'd also, be willing to share the data with the family members too. Have those conversations as part of your marketing. If your team is doing a really good job when it comes to something like response times and responding to call buttons or pull cords or anything like that in a very, very quick time, be proud of that and show that. Use the data that you have that is very good for your community. Make sure you use that in your marketing.
Things like response times and
Right.
Yep. And hospitalizations. If you guys do a great job of people or average length of stay, those types of things, when they're really good, use that in your materials because again, data is really important. And as in this day and age, more and more people are looking at data and they're looking at it and making decisions that aren't just emotional, but that are also data driven.
Absolutely. We had a question come in here too. Is CarePredict designed only for facilities and or clients can use at home? I can answer that question. We are used in senior living communities, home care, home health, and also aging in place. So we have a solution for anybody and their needs to be utilized. So let's keep moving along here to the next question. And when we look at data and we look at conversations around data, there's so many different ways. And so I think the problem with data is there's just so much data nowadays that we all become overwhelmed and it's kind of analysis paralysis. Like, I don't know what to do with this. When you think about that, what are some key data points and critical ones that communities should be looking at, Scott, when they think about hard conversations and utilizing certain data points?
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna, Kristin as the nurse,
Yep.
let me let Kristin jump in on that, and I'll just kind of tag on to that. So I can see she's ready to answer. So I'm gonna let her go.
Yeah, I think one of the things daily that you want to look at is you want to understand who are your top utilizers, who's calling for extra assistance. Do I need to take a deeper look into the care plan to make sure that we're anticipating the needs of the resident? Is the care plan customized correctly? And with different data platforms, you're able to see what is the response time? How long is my staff spending taking care of the resident? What are the top 4 or 5 things that residents are calling for assistance on? I think that sometimes can be really surprising for people. They may think, bathing and dressing are the number 1 things that residents are calling for, but they may be surprised to find that it's escorting is taking up the majority of time, or medication calls are taking up the majority of time. And there are things that they can put in place to reduce the burden on staff by better planning out that care.
Yeah, and I would add to that, and I think, when we start to look at this, there's 2 benefits to really making sure that you have the care plan. Several benefits, but for the resident side and for you as the community, have that care plan correct is one. The key thing there is that you're perceiving the needs of your residents, right? So it is a good customer service side of things to have things in a care plan that that the resident is going to need. And so it's not just there is the ROI point of this, right? We want to make sure that if something is being done by our team members, that we are being compensated for that as part of it. But it also is being able to say, we know our residents and we know what their needs are, and we're going to make sure that we anticipate those needs and we get those things done without them having to call us all the time. And that's a better experience for the resident. And I think one of the things that everybody wants is to be known and to be seen. And if I can, you know me, and that I need help with getting dressed in the morning, and I don't have to call you for help, and you just come in and you do that, that makes me feel seen as a resident. It makes me feel like I belong here and that this is home. And so part of the care plan is not just the ROI side of it, of that, and the labor side of it, which we'll talk about. It is also that it's really knowing your customer, which every other industry really wants. They use data to know their customer, and we can do the same thing here in senior living.
That's awesome. And when you think about all of the data that you could get, looking at the data and analyzing it, Kristin, when you think about actually implementing a system like this, how do you go about building kind of some SOPs and ensuring that the data actually gets looked at and reviewed? And how do you get the team all huddled around that? What are some best practices around that?
Yeah, I think really diving in when you're using a platform and understanding how it works, working with any people from that company, like a customer success manager like myself, and understanding the tools that are being provided to you and how to utilize them and building them into your daily process. For example, a daily stand-up dashboard that shows you what response time is, what your staff experience is, who is calling more frequently than the next person, what staff are responding the most. Something that really gives you, puts your finger on the pulse of your community, and building it in to your workflow. And I think the number 1 thing is great education. Teaching people how to use it and having ongoing support. I think that's the number 1 thing to success.
That's great. Thanks, Kristin. Let's keep going along here. And Scott, why don't you talk about how data can be used for your care team, for your staff, how to leverage it to the best of your ability in the senior living community?
Yeah, I think just as we were talking about earlier, we talked about kind of having emotional conversations with family members. Sometimes conversations with team members can be equally kind of emotional, especially if we're looking at a correction plan or any of those types of things. So lots of ways that you can utilize data to help with this. So we've talked in the past about response time. We've talked about all those things, but I think it's really important to use data to come up to really when you're evaluating a team member's performance or how they're doing. And so one of the things that the saying I always kind of heard and internalized is I can't manage what I can't measure, right? Yeah. So how do we utilize data to measure our team members' success? So looking at things like what is an individual resident or team member's response time? Are they responding to a lot of alerts? What does their shift look like? There are those people who are really good at making it look like they're always busy, but the data doesn't lie. How many calls did you take during your shift? What percentage of the total calls that came through did you take? How long does it take you to do this? Those are really good indicators of that person's ability to jump in and work. And so I think first we look at that, which is like the hard data, especially when you're looking at performance reviews, yearly reviews, or even looking at a correction plan. And so it's one of the things I would look at when running a building is when I'm going to have a conversation with a care team member is let me pull some of the data that we have access to just so I can get the emotion out of this and really start to look at that data first. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is that's the negative side, but the positive side is we have to be acknowledging those that are working hard.
Sure.
And it's not just what I see; it's what's happening when I'm not there in the building. If I'm an executive director, if I'm a director of nursing, what is happening when I'm not there? And let me recognize people who are taking a lot of calls, who are interacting with the residents more, who are going above and beyond. Kind of the saying is, we used to say this a lot in memory care, there's nothing sweeter than the sound of your own name, right? And so one of those things is to hear your name acknowledged during, that day or at a monthly staff meeting or whatever, however you do it, to use data just to call out specific residents or team members, I apologize, is really a good way of helping with retention as well. I think it's really important that we're looking at the good side, and then maybe those that maybe are struggling a little bit when it comes to data and performances.
That makes a lot of sense. And how can CarePredict support that? When you're implementing our system, when you're utilizing it, what are some of the best ways that it can support some of those conversations?
I think the key thing is to really take the emotion out of it. Take not just what your eyes are seeing. I think that's important. Yeah. You have that qualitative measure, which is I'm watching, I see this, but there's the quantitative side of it, which is looking at something like a predictive dashboard or a dashboard that's showing you exactly how many calls this individual team member took. When a resident calls for assistance, who was the first one to say, I got it? Or how long did it take them to raise their hand and say, I'm going to go in there and take care of that? That's a huge part of this. Who's looking at, your scheduled care? Who's completing the most tasks in a shift? All of those things are really important so that we're able to really, move beyond any bias that we may have and really look at some of that data to see. I think that's extremely important to do.
With CNA turnover and care team turnover still very high, right? It's been high. It's been a conversation in senior living since I've been in it for over a decade. When you think about some of those metrics for predicting, we talk about health predicting at CarePredict and utilizing all this data to help communities provide better care. What are some of the additional data points you might look at when you think of somebody turning over or not happy and actually leaving? What are some of those data points you might be able to look at and say, hey, maybe I should go have a conversation with this person?
Yeah, I think, everywhere we go in society now, we're getting these one or two kind of question surveys, right? It's just a real, you go in, we travel quite a bit. You go into a restroom at an airport and you leave and it's like smiley face or frowny face. It's instantaneous kind of feedback. And I think what many senior living companies rely on is on an annual or a biannual kind of review or survey they send out to their team members. But at that point, it's too late. Like that person is already set into their feelings of the community. And then by the time you go through all of that data, we've struggled this with organizations I've worked in the past. By the time we create a correction plan or something we see, like that's another 3 or 4 months. By the time we get that implemented, the next survey is coming back out if you're doing it twice a year. And so all of a sudden, your solution can't keep up with the feedback that you're getting because you're getting so much at one time rather than every single day. Hey, how was your day today, right? Whether that's a formal survey that you take through something like a CarePredict through an app, or whether that is, as leadership in a community, you're asking for feedback every single day from your team. Being able to see any trends that you can see in that is extremely important. I think the other piece of this, kind of talking about just, team members in general, And this is something that I would just encourage people to do, is to get feedback from your residents, right? And that's like, have them, before you do an evaluation with your team, talk to the residents. Like, how do you feel this individual is doing? Do you feel like they know you? Do you feel like they care? Like, those types of things. Ultimately, they are the customer in that building, and so getting their feedback is essential. Data is a huge piece of that. We want to have that, but we also want to have that qualitative piece as well, which is feedback from the residents themselves.
Those are awesome data points to put into that conversation. Now, the question is, how do you approach that conversation then? So somebody is, on the verge of, maybe turning over, unhappy. I would love to hear from you guys how you would actually approach that situation with a team member.
I can give you an example of one of my customers recently. They look at, they do a review of the data every week in a weekly team call. And one of the things that they look at is staff satisfaction. And they noticed one of their nurses kept showing up for the past couple of weeks with low numbers, like not very happy. And it was unusual. The executive director reached out to the nurse and said, hey, how's everything going? You seem a little off. And turned out this person was having some personal issues, and they were able to share that with the executive director, who was able to make some accommodation and provide some support around them while they were going through a personal crisis. And they kept her employed, and she's happier because of it. So that's just one example.
It just shows you how critical the frequency of actually jumping into those conversations is, right? Like, if you're waiting 6 months, 12 months to get a feedback, it's too late. That person's probably long gone. Scott, any feedback on that? Any thoughts?
No, I think, to your point, it is definitely frequent feedback. The more we get feedback from our team members, whether that's through like a survey through CarePredict, or whether that's through an informal process or whatever you have, the quicker you can respond to that. And the key is, we have team members that we value, so we can start to do some comparative analysis too. So you really look and see, who are my team members that are really, like, seem maybe they're struggling, but they're a really good team member. I really want to invest in this person. We know the cost of turnover is extremely high. So what is it going to take to save those team members who we know that are on the verge of maybe quitting? We hear the term quiet quit, right? And that term of, like, someone's quiet quitted. They aren't putting in the full kind of effort they were before. It's typically not a quiet quit if you give them resources to actually explain that they're unhappy, or you actually reach out to them. It's only a quiet quit when we just let them continue on their day or their day and their week, and we don't actually ask for feedback. And so, and we want to be proactive about it. So at CarePredict, one of the things that we do is we have a survey that they actually take when they log out of the app at the end of the shift. That is a constant kind of a thing there. It's not just like a box that's a suggestion box or anything like that. It's actually requiring them to kind of answer a question when they log out. Those are the types of things that you want to instill in your community to collect a lot of data. So if you have something that's a daily or a weekly feedback, that's going to give you a lot of data points throughout a year. And so, again, the key of that is frequency. So we're not waiting 6 months or a year to get that information. We're doing it daily. We're doing it weekly. And then we have a process, like Kristin said, to really evaluate that information, to look at it, internalize it, and then create a correction plan for ourselves.
That's super impactful, especially at a leader at a community, or you're a regional director overseeing a few communities and rolling up that data and sharing it. It's super impactful for the care team and turnover. If you think about it from the lens of an actual care team member or CNA that's doing it, I'm sure there's pushback around, hey, you're monitoring me, you're getting all these data points around me, collecting it, sort of big brother scenario. How would you approach that within a community if you're getting all of these different data points on a daily basis from a team member?
I think the key thing is it's as a leader, that they know your heart. My heart is that we are providing the best possible care for our residents, and I'm providing the best possible work environment for you. And we're going to use this data to improve your work experience and improve our residents' living experience. And really, that's what we're trying to do at the end of the day. But you have to not just say it, you have to show it, right? And so it's by taking some of this feedback, you are making changes that really do matter. And we also understand that there is, again, we're taking care of a older adult, and their loved one is a part of that. So we need to have data to share with them. that they're going to want to know what's happening with mom. And we know that sometimes the resident isn't the most reliable source. So I'm sure many of you on this call have had residents say things like, no one ever visits my mom, or my mom says she never leaves the room, or my mom. And so to be able to really show data to say, hey, here's the reality of what's happening in our community. I just wanted you to know that. And that's a great tool to have a tough conversation with families. It can also be like, let me just show you, your mom actually was in the dining room 3 times a day, every day. She's been eating every single meal. Let me show you some of the data we have to support that. Or here are the team members who have visited your mother in the last 24 hours. Those things are great. And as a team member, we want to get your feedback. We want to reward those that are working hard, and we make sure we have those things in place. So like I said, we're highlighting the team members who are doing a great job from the data. All right. And so now they start to see the data as not Big Brother, but they see the data going, hey, it's acknowledging, the data is being used to acknowledge when I do great work. I think that's a big shift for people.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, right? You're not just utilizing it to find out where your low performers are. You're utilizing it as a tool to ensure people are recognized and that people feel heard and seen, right? Like, you're doing this job and you care about your job. And it is wonderful to be seen for the effort that you're putting in and the exceptional care that you are providing over to those residents. So,
and I see it all the time. I'm in buildings all the time, been in 500 or 600 buildings in my career. I will see like the gold star, or a resident has the ability to write a thank you or acknowledge a team member. And I think those are amazing things. Extend that exact same thing with the data that you have at your fingertips, right? So you have that qualitative measure, then we add the quantitative, saying, not only did this person kind of get a gold star or a attaboy from the residents, we also have this data to say you took the most calls, you spent the most time with residents in their room, whatever it may be, whatever data you're able to collect, and to also utilize that as a great thing. Because you have sometimes like your hardest worker might not be your most personable person, but they are doing their job and they're doing it at a really high level, and we want to make sure they're acknowledged as well.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
On that line, Scott and Josh, I have one of our customers, the owner of the company, actually takes and once a week handwrites out to a team member that is really going above and beyond, and he uses the data from Care Predict to get that part of the story that they are sharing. So it really goes a long way. I
love that. How many times I haven't gotten a handwritten note in many years. What an impactful thing to do, to show that you really care. That's awesome. When you think about these programs, and you think about all of this data, where do you see these programs go wrong? When you have the data, you have all this information, where do you see it go left opposed to going right?
Yeah. I look at it. I think oh, go ahead.
Don't you go then, Kristin? You can.
Okay. So I think Kristin said it earlier when she said that you have to operationalize these things, right? Like you have to create processes. So when we start to talk about things like having tough conversations with your team members, like you have to operationalize that as part of your annual review process, or as part of your 6-month review process, that you're using data in there all the time. I think the great opportunity is in your daily stand-up. So look at your daily stand-up that you're doing in your community. It's one of the constants in our industry. Do you use data to make decisions for the day? Or is your stand-up just a very traditional, here are the tours we have today, here's the activities we have today, here's what's on our menu. All right, break, let's go. Let's really look at data and really come up with a plan of which residents do I need to lay eyes on today? Which residents do we need to have conversations with? Which team members do I need to say, great job yesterday? And switch your daily stand-up from just kind of this 10 or 15 minute, like, yep, here's what's happening today, to like, here's a plan for the day based on the metrics that we have at our fingertips. If you're not putting those things in place and the leader of the community is not using the data to make important decisions and to drive the process in the community, it's going to be very difficult. Leadership really matters when it comes to this, when you try to operationalize things.
Got it. Buy-in, consistency. You need both of those, right? Absolutely. Kristin, go ahead.
Yeah, everything Scott said, and one of the things that I do with our customers is I give them a process. I say, here's what you want to look at Monday morning. You're going to look at this, you're going to set your tone for the week, and then daily you're going to look at this report. It's going to take you less than 5 minutes. Less than 5 minutes to look at the data, make a list, and develop a strategy to follow through for the week. So, and I think we can all agree that that's worth it.
5 minutes. That's all it takes, right? It's kind of like those infomercial back in the day, right? Set it and forget it. Like I had the turkey on the roaster, right? And everything's okay. And then all of a sudden I have this gourmet dinner,
Yeah.
But that's the beauty, I think about your guys' industry experience, and you've seen it. You've seen it all, right? You've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And just that expertise in kind of sharing some of those helpful tips are impactful to the audience that we have here on the webinar. And, kind of rounding out this presentation, we got about 5 to 10 minutes left here. And if you have any questions, again, feel free to pop on in. When you think about this resident journey and you think about starting off and looking for a community to moving through the continuum of care, data helps shape that. And the quality of care is obviously impactful. Anything else you want to add when you think about those different stages and inflection points within the resident journey and how data can impact that? Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, well, I think a key thing is sometimes the changes in the residents happen they're very small, and we see a resident every single day. And so it's a gradual decline in their health potentially that the naked eye can't see, right? It's the family member sees it. And so that's why in senior living, all of you guys know here, like it's really the beginning of the new year when is the busiest, because as a family member, as a loved one, I just spent time with my mom or dad around the holidays. And I was like, wow, things have really changed since last time I saw them. But if I see them every single day, it's hard to detect those minor changes. The same thing is happening for our care team. The same thing is happening for our leadership in the building. Is I don't really notice the small decline that happens. I get the fall happens and then there's a major change. Data can help with these small incremental changes in the kind of acuity of a resident. So a resident went from calling us 3 or 4 times a day, then it was 5 to 6 times a day, and then 9 to 10 times a day. But it's gradual over 2 or 3 months. To have the data to show that progression is really important, because then we can kind of intervene earlier, modify things, change things so they can stay in that level of care longer. So I think that's a huge piece of this, is that we can't always see the changes in their condition. Sometimes the data is what's going to have to show that to us.
And there are things like fall risk, UTI risk, that it's so prevalent in the demographics of the people we're taking care of, and it's subtle. Unless somebody is really verbal about something that's going on, they may not even know it themselves. But having something passive that can kind of clue you into that, and having that objective data that you can share with a provider. As a nurse, I have for years had a sixth sense. I know when someone has a UTI. I can just tell. And I can remember having calls with the doctor and saying, Dr. Collins, I think we need an antibiotic here. And he'd say, well, Kristin, tell me what you see. Tell me exactly what the symptoms are. And I'm like, well, I just know. And this gives you the exact things that you can share with providers so that they get a better sense of what's going on and they can treat this person in place.
Absolutely. And the only way to create a team full of Kristins is to have the data so they can go and support those conversations, right? Until they have the years of experience that you have. That's something that I think they'll keep leaning on into. Well, this has been a great discussion, Scott and Kristin. We have some key takeaways here. I'm going to give you each a minute or so to wrap up. What do you think are the most impactful things that the audience should walk away with here? And Scott, if you could go.
Yeah, I think consistency is huge. Operationalize processes and have consistency. That's the number one thing for me. Is I see so many communities come out really they're going to hit something really hard. They try it for a little while and then they just kind of stop. And the more we kind of start and stop new things and we don't really operationalize these things, all of a sudden our team members go, that'll go away pretty soon. Just wait. They're not going to stick with it. They're not going to stick with it. And so I think to really make great changes in your community for your residents and for your team members, you really have to be consistent. You have to operationalize it and figure out a way to make that part of your daily routine. And so I think that's a big piece of this. And the other piece of this is data can help tell the complete story, right? And so I think we're many times we want to hear the qualitative side of things, but sometimes the quantitative is just as important, or maybe many times more important. And so when it comes to our residents' story, you need to piece both together. What do I see with my eyes, and what is the data telling me? When it comes to my team members, I need to look at both of those. What am I hearing from the residents? What am I hearing from their coworkers? What am I seeing with my eyes, and what is the data telling me? When you piece all of that together, I think that helps you have a complete picture and really help you manage a community or multiple communities when you have quantitative and qualitative data to use.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Kristin.
Yep, I think really just listening to your customer, which is your resident, their families, your team members, and really hearing what people are saying, using whatever technology that you have, and really leaning into the vendor who is providing that technology. They should have a customer success manager or somebody that is going to help you use the product and get the very most out of it. If you're investing in a platform, you want someone that's going to make sure you're using it to its fullest capability. And setting up a process, like Scott said, is the key to success there.
That's awesome. We have a question that came in here. How does CarePredict support care teams with different data points? I'll pass it over to Scott.
Yeah, so lots of different ways that we can do that. I think when you start to look at a care team, you have to really say, what is the most important thing for us, right? And so lots of different metrics that we can look at that we can help you with from CarePredict's perspective. I think the most important one really is, like, how long does it take you to raise your hand and say, I'm going to go help that resident, right? And so I always look at it, from CarePredict's perspective. A push button comes through, but any nurse call system, it comes through, and someone has to accept it and say, yep, I'm going to go take care of that. Who's doing that the quickest? Because that's really your go-getter, right? Now, it may take, the other one is how quickly do they get to the room and all of those things. There's a lot of factors in that, but the person who just raises their hand first and is like, yep, I'll go take care of that, is kind of that person that you really want to be identifying. And then the other one is just spending time with residents. It's a huge part of it. Which one of your team members is spending more time in residents' rooms and less times kind of out in the hallways or out in general areas? I think it's not just the care they provide, it's the socialization. It is the feeling of belonging that a caregiver, a really good caregiver, can actually provide for a resident. That's the other essential piece. And so, CarePredict has both of those data points that you can look at and really kind of have those conversations and identify who's doing it great and who's maybe struggling, and it's a good coaching opportunity.
That's awesome. And I think about data, and I think about where we are today, and all of us technology providers in this space, it's all about how do we spend quality time with that resident and socialize and build that rapport, right? Like, technology can only go so far to actually have that helping hand and have that person there from a socialization and care standpoint. So that's what we're trying to do. Kristin, anything else to add to that?
No, I think Scott nailed it.
All right. Awesome. Well, we are right at time here. If people want to get in contact with Kristin or Scott, you could see their contact information here. And again, thanks for joining us on this panel, Kristin and Scott. Thanks for this great conversation. And audience, thanks for attending. The recording will be sent out afterwards, and I hope you got some excellent information from experts here at CarePredict. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.